And welcome back to Continue Freedom. If this is your first time here, welcome aboard. If you are a returning guest, I want to thank you so much for coming back and joining me every single time I release a video. You guys are really helping me. But I will say that there's about 95% of the folks that are watching my videos who are not subscribed. So hit the subscribe bell, or hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, because that's going to let you get notified every time I release a new video. And we can build this channel into something great. We've seen a lot of growth here over just the past week. It's been fantastic, and we want to keep that going. We are on our road to 1,000. We will be there before we know it. But I'm just super, super appreciative for everybody that joins me. Now, I want to talk about something today. I'm going to talk about Trump first off. We've got a lot to cover. But with Trump, he's doing something that I wish a lot more presidential candidates would do. Namely, sitting down on some of these long-form podcasts and having substantive conversations with people. And in a long-form interview, that's something that is really vulnerable for a politician to do. That's why they've over my entire life, they've restricted themselves to these short-form. They'll do a couple of minutes here and there. Sometimes they'll sit down, but you think about a 40-minute interview with commercials or an hour-long interview with commercials. They're really only talking for a half an hour at the most. And so he's opened himself up to any question and every question that could come up, and he handles it on the spot. He's been with Theo Vaughn. He's been with the Impulsive guys. He's been with the Nelk Boys. He's sat down with tons and tons of people in long-form, hour-long, hour-plus, 2-hour interviews. And that's something that presidential candidates, I believe, need to be doing from this point forward, because we need to actually know who is representing us. And Trump, I believe, is doing that because he wants to show the man behind the legend. He wants to show different sides of himself so that people understand who he is now, because we know who he has been for the past 60 years. But, he's 78, but we knew his philandering days. We knew his reality show days, all the stuff. He was one of the most public figures in America. But in this instance, this is a humanizing story, and there's a lot of them that people just don't ever get to listen to. But this is a humanizing story told by RFK Jr. But let's listen to it, because you guys are going to really get a kick out of this.
Our second video of the day comes to us from RFK Jr. During a recent event while campaigning for President Trump, he was asked what he thought about Trump as a person, and he shared this amazing story.
I've known President Trump for many years, and on 2 occasions I sued him. He was trying to build golf courses up in the New York City reservoir watershed, and I sued him successfully to stop that. And at one point, my wife, she wanted to go to Palm Beach for the weekend to see my mom over Easter, and I said, I didn't want to buy tickets for all the kids. And she said, what if I find a free ride? And I said, okay. Then she said, I found a free ride. And I said, who? And she said, Donald Trump. And I said, I'm suing him. And she said, he told me he knows you're suing him, but it's okay anyway. And we ended up flying down with him, and I had a great time. I still sued him, and
It's such an interesting story, because you kind of separate the friendship from the legal stuff. It's like, yeah, you sue me, I get it, that's what you do. Yeah. But I'm not, you want to use my plane, fine. I mean, some people would not understand that.
No, I think I have been able to do that. Otherwise, I would have nobody to talk to at all. Greg, it was interesting. I endorse people, and my endorsement record is very good. But sometimes I'll endorse people that said horrible, horrible things about me. And people say, do you have any idea what he said? And I said, if I did that, I would never be able to endorse anybody, because when I first ran, everybody was violently opposed to me. So I would never be able to endorse anybody. And I like to endorse
I said
people
terrible
if I
things.
think they're good. Honestly, you weren't so good at the beginning.
I believe we have the tape. That's right. I'm making my move, Gutfield. Roll it.
But he's had countless of these moments where he's, and I say humanized, but it's for us to see not the media's, how the media has captured him and then repackaged him and sent him out to us, the media being the mainstream media, but how he actually is when he's in conversation with people. And there's going to be folks who say, I don't need to watch him on a long-form interview. I know exactly who he is. He's a racist, he's a fascist, he's a Nazi, and he's going to destroy our country. That's the way a lot of people will see it and will forever see it. But for those folks that are on the fence, we still have to look at the 4 years of the Trump presidency and the 4 years since the Trump presidency. We can clearly see a difference. It's like this spike in our economic performance and in our way of life. Our general, just the general way of life for the average American was drastically improved in 4 years. And unfortunately, we didn't get him for 8 solid years because it's hard to tell what would have been accomplished if that had happened. But they still want to see him, a lot of folks, as the 40-something who was a womanizer and who was, a socialite billionaire, the guy who's been married several times, who cheated on his wives. And these folks apparently believe that there is no change in someone. Even though he's 78 years old, I highly doubt he could do a push-up right now. That he's got a truckload of grandchildren. They still want to see him as the 40-something philanderer. And the funny thing is, that 40-something philanderer didn't bother them because they were all watching The Apprentice. It didn't bother them because they were, cheering and whooping and hollering because Donald Trump was this, he was Mr. America for so many years. Didn't bother him then, but he runs for president. And of course, because of the message that's been fed to them by the mainstream media, they turned on a dime and he's a completely different person than the one that they loved years and years ago. And so, I want to highlight a couple of things, and I'm just going to give them to you just right off the bat, that he has done behind the scenes that have now been documented that went completely under the radar. But there was a man who helped change a flat tire. His vehicle had stopped. A guy changed his flat tire. What does Donald Trump do? He goes and pays off the guy's house. This is when he was kind of at his peak. He hired a woman called Barbara Rez to handle one of his construction projects, and this is back in the 80s. She attributes it herself to being the first woman who ever built a skyscraper, but people are still going to say, nope, he hates women, he's a misogynist, he's evil, da-da-da-da-da. He gave a flight on his jet to a dying kid for free. They'll say, nope, that's just a one-off. That's just another one. Jennifer Hudson, if you all remember Jennifer Hudson, she had several of her family members were killed. He offered to put up the rest of the family in Trump Tower for free so that they had a secure place to stay, apparently out of the limelight and all of that. There was a guy, a bus driver, just a random bus driver, who saved a woman. It made the news. He turns around, sends the guy a $10,000 check because he said, you know what? You saved a life today, and I believe that deserves a reward. So he gave the guy $10,000. And there's countless things where he's done with veterans and veteran families, of going to bat for them with the VA, turning around, and one guy who had been wounded got him his VA benefits the next day. I mean, it's one thing after another. He's a guy, I believe, who understands he has been blessed in this life, and he wants to give back to others. And that's not to say the man is perfect. He's not a saint. But if we wait for a perfect saint, there's only one that's going to ever come back. One perfect human will ever walk this earth. One has walked in the past and one will walk in the future. But we're not going to get perfection out of anybody. We have to find people with the right policies and the people with the right motivations, inside of their platform and inside of their heart, to be perfectly honest. What is driving them? Is it personal ambition, or is it improving the country? We can look at a Kamala Harris, and in my opinion, it is personal ambition. She's been an individual who's really failed upwards in politics. She got into it in very precarious situations by sleeping with Willie Brown, who got her a no-show job in California politics that kind of kicked her off from there. But the results we could look at the results from a Trump presidency, look at the results from a Biden-Harris presidency, and they're wildly different. And the results from the Biden-Harris presidency are starting to make some people pretty angry. And it's not just the presidency, but it's the party as a whole. This lady is in Chicago. We're going to listen to some of her comments that she had at a city council meeting, because I believe it is wildly telling. It's unbelievable. Listen to her.
Say to you that you are a disgrace. I'm an 80-year-old woman, and I've never seen anything like this. I grew up in the Jim Crow South, and the policies that you're passing in this city remind me of the Jim Crow South. I had to drink out of a colored water fountain, or the whites would drink out of a white water fountain. But you know what I didn't have to worry about? Going back to my community, and it would be destroyed. And everybody else is in my community but black people. And this is what you've done with this immigration. You have allowed all these people, you brought all these people into this city. You are destroying this city. And the black community is flooded with all of these immigrants, violent ones, prostitution, gangs. You did that. You are doing this to your people. You are an absolute disgrace to me. Like I said, I drank out of that colored water fountain, but I could go back to that black community that was intact. Women are crying. Taxes are going up. What am I going to do with my children? Where are we going to go and live? This is because of you, Brandon Johnson. You're destroying the south side of Chicago with your policy, all under the Democratic Party.
This is why things like Chicago Red, I'm eventually going to have Osiris from Chicago Red on the show once we can get our schedules to line up, right? And I'm absolutely looking forward to it because they are leading this movement to turn Chicago into a red city. They have been under Democrat policies for so long, and now you add this illegal immigration crisis to a city like Chicago, and people are fed up. They are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and it's not just Chicago. This is happening in cities across the country. You know, we can look at what happened in Springfield, right? I've talked about that in the past. Well, I have to remind you that the Biden-Harris admin warns Americans don't go to Haiti due to the risk of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. So you don't have to go there. You don't need to go there. We'll bring Haiti to you. People with an entirely different culture, people in a crime-ridden culture, we're going to bring them to you. Don't worry. But don't you go there because you'll be at risk. This Venezuelan gang in New York, they have infiltrated this. I always say that we're sometimes victims of our own generosity because they have all these migrant shelters that they have set up, and this gang is using them to recruit people and saying that if you don't join the gang, we're going to kill you or kill your family or whatever. They're being threatened into joining the gang. They've brought a lethal mix of fentanyl that they're calling pink cocaine into the area. They're running prostitution. They are running illegal guns, committing crimes all over the city. They are overwhelming the New York Police Department. And I'll read this quote here. Not every migrant is here. Is here to commit crimes. Not every migrant is a gang member, the chief said. But these TDA guys hide very well in plain sight in the migrant community. Any immigrant who does not join up with the gang is labeled as a culebra or an enemy to TDA. We aren't looking to grab the food delivery guy, but these guys go so far as to wear Uber Eats clothing, use the delivery bags while they're out there committing their crimes. They're hiding in plain sight, terrorizing the population, overdoses, death, murder. And this is what has been brought into our country because of what? Generosity? You know, this is what I've had this conversation with a lot of people. If you can feel sorry for the plight of people all around the world, we have a limited amount of space and a limited amount of resources here in the country, just on our citizens and of course, the illegals as well. But we're spending $1.5 trillion more than we're bringing in a year. That's like we're essentially at a family now that is $100,000 a year in combined income, and we have $120,000 in credit card debt. That's how we're operating our country. We are in no position to be taking on additional people. That's not to say that migrants aren't, we can't bring in legal migrants. We absolutely should, the best and the brightest. But to allow military-age males, la-di-da-di everybody, to come across the border, we are getting things like this. Back to Springfield. Let's go to this small little town in Springfield, and it's now involving other cities, other neighboring areas. But there's an alleged murder for hire plot in Charleroi, which revealed migrant labor mules. They're essentially running Haitian slaves to work in food processing plants here in America. These are people that there's video of this, and I'm not showing the video today, but there's video of them scoping out all of these houses where they are using as hubs to move Haitian migrants into food processing plants where they work for peanuts. But then the guy that is running these folks, they call him King George. King George lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion, and he's doing it all off the backs of migrants. Lest we forget what happened in the Deep South. Slavery is not a strictly Western thing, first off. Slavery was one of the blights on our society, but it's a blight on every society. But where we had the rich people enslaving folks, that has not stopped. And in fact, there's more people in slavery today than there ever was in the early founding of our country. But that's a whole nother topic. But it's still happening today in plain sight. And you know what? It's the same party, the exact same political party that is enabling it. It's the Democrats, or the people that are influenced by their donors. This is what we are trying to stop. They need to sow discord. They need to create paranoia in the people, and they're going to do it on election night. You know, I called this in my last video, and I will continue to shout it from the rooftops. But here, the Post Millennial has brought it up. The Washington Post said voters should expect delays in election results. Well, of course, if you all remember in my last video, I was talking about all these illegal, this was another report about all these illegal ballots that had been sent out in Pennsylvania to their voters. And then some of these influencers came back and were, you know, I voted, they had their I voted pen and all that on. And Jack Posobiec called out one of them saying, hey, these ballots haven't passed the LNA testing that is required by state law. So they immediately, knowingly, by the way, created illegal ballots, sent those ballots out, knowing they were going to be contentious when they come back. And then what are you going to get? You're going to get this in places like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Now, if you also remember my last video, I refreshed our memory of the spike in 2020, where we saw overnight at about 4:30 in the morning, this vertical line, which has now become a meme on the internet, but this vertical line in the number of people who had cast their ballots for Joe Biden. Every single one was a Biden vote. It spiked. Biden ends up winning. This is what they're trying to prepare us for. Hey, well, you know, because a lot of people will brush it off and say, it's a contentious election. It's a big deal. There's going to be delays. There's going to be issues with it. There don't have to be, people. There don't have to be. This is all intentional. And, you know, I've been worried about it for a while. But Pentagon, oh boy, here we go, sending more ground troops into the Middle East as tensions escalate. So you've probably heard about Israel launching a major attack in Lebanon. But the U.S. is sending a small number of ground troops to the Middle East as a larger war between Israel and Hezbollah threatens to break out, the Pentagon announced Monday. Defense Department Secretary Major General Pat Ryder told reporters the new detachment was being sent in light of increased tension in the Middle East and out of abundance of caution. We are sending a small number of additional U.S. military personnel to augment our forces that are already in the region, so keep that in mind. We've already got troops in the region. He's declining to offer specifics about the new contingent, though he did refer to them as ground troops. The U.S. Already has an array of forces positioned in the Middle East, including the USS Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Strike Group and the ballistic missile submarine USS Georgia, along with additional squadron of F-22 fighter jets. In the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, there are 6 U.S. warships, including USS Wasp, amphibious assault ship. This is how these things happen, everybody. We do this all the time. It's incremental, then all at once. It happens a little at a time, and then, boom, we're in World War III. Boom, we're in another forever war. This is what they want. And the guy who is trying to stop all of this is Donald Trump. And what does the Department of Justice do? They send out the letter from Ryan Routh, where he offers a $150,000 reward for anybody that will finish the job. The Department of Justice did this. They put out, through a backhanded way, an open contract on the President of the United States. Do you see what's happening here? This letter need not be released, by the way. But they said, no, let's go ahead and push this out for all the world to see. And Donald Trump Jr. had the right response. He said, WTF, why is Kamala's DOJ publicizing Ryan Wesley Routh putting a bounty on my dad's head? People, that is intentional. Nobody is going to misconstrue that as for exactly what it is. That is the DOJ saying, well, we can't call for it, but this guy did, so let's let all the nut jobs out there know that there's $150,000 up for grabs if they will finish the job. There's so much more at work than a lot of people are willing to admit. There's so much more at work. There's one, well, I can't say definitively what it is, but this was horribly troubling for a guy who, I have talked about in a positive light for years. He's was kind of the American dream, the guy that stepped up at a city council meeting, talking about his Second Amendment rights, making his voice heard. Next thing you know, the guy's out making speeches for the NRA. Then he becomes all of a sudden the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and now he's running to be the governor. A man from humble beginnings, making it all the way up to the governor's mansion. And this scandal comes out right here at obviously a very convenient time. CNN reported Sunday that 4 campaign officials with Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, North Carolina's governor campaign, have dropped out of the race following a report from the network published Thursday. The report outlined that the lieutenant governor had made inflammatory comments on a pornography website's message board more than a decade ago. General consultant and senior chief advisor Conrad Porgaleski III, campaign manager, I don't need to read all their names. These are the people that dropped out. One of the lewd comments CNN reported Robinson making on the message board included referring to himself as a black Nazi. Following the campaign officials dropping out, Robinson issued a statement that he would stay in the race. My campaign will continue to focus on the substantive issues at stake in this election, building an economy that grows from Murphy to Manteo, cutting taxes, and eliminating unsuccessful red tape. Polls have consistently underestimated Republican support in North Carolina for several cycles now, and with a large portion of the electorate still undecided as we continue to ramp up our efforts across the state, I am confident our campaign remains in a strong position to make our case to the voters and win on November 5th. But my, oh my, how convenient when this guy is making massive waves, always on social media. I mean, everybody loves to highlight him. He's talking in churches, he's talking everywhere. And all of a sudden, some really nefarious stuff comes out. And of course, he's denying it, is my understanding. He's saying, no, this is all fabricated. I'm not, and it reeks, I mean, honestly, in this political environment, it reeks of controversy, reeks of conspiracy, just knowing who this guy is. But we have to watch this one closely, because if it comes out that this is actually true, this will have massive, massive impacts, because this guy carries, he carries so much bloody support, like a ridiculous amount of support. And the guy had a meteoric rise. Like I say, he was a fairy tale story. Hardworking man turned lieutenant governor and then eventually making it to the governor's mansion. I hope that it's false, but I don't think it's ridiculous for us to say there's a possibility. I mean, this guy's a pretty devout Baptist. He's definitely a devout churchgoer. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this is just a underhanded hit job, because North Carolina could potentially turn red. I was going to talk about this latest case with the abortion and all that stuff. I don't know if you heard about it down in Georgia. In fact, I'll go ahead and end on that one. Let's go ahead and talk about it. But here we go. Let me see if I can pull this up. There it is. Oh, it's going to play. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play this video. This is one, I'm going to play it just because it's important. If you haven't seen this lady, she is, it's Kristen, is it Kristen? Yeah, Kristen Hawkins. Unbelievable pro-life advocate. She's right there with Lila Rose. They are two of the biggest names in the pro-life world. But to kind of add on, it's really an add-on to how the left is willing to lie. I mean, any politician's going to lie at some point, I'm sure. But the left is so intentionally misleading that we have to understand the woman who died, who they say died because of the pro-life party not allowing abortions and the restrictions put on abortion. This lady, Kristen, is going to give a much better explanation of this so that we can just all be in the know on what actually happened with this case. But this is the danger of the abortion movement in removing all of the safeguards for things like mifepristone, just mailing it out like you're mailing out children's Tylenol to these women, not requiring any doctor visits before or after. These are all the safeguards that were eliminated by the Biden presidency. Let's listen to this explanation.
That came out yesterday and said there was a woman after Roe was reversed, who lived in Georgia, which Georgia had adapted and passed, their state legislators had passed the 6-week abortion heartbeat prevention law, which, by the way, Donald Trump now opposes. Donald Trump didn't have anything to do with this law, trust me, was not helpful at all. So Roe versus Wade is reversed, and this law is already in effect. This law was actually already in effect in Georgia. She is a young mom, unmarried, has a boyfriend. I think she's living with her boyfriend in the story. Gets the baby, her child is 6 years old. She's pregnant with twins. She goes to North Carolina to have a surgical abortion. She shows up late to the surgical abortion facility. She says her and her friend got stuck. Well, her friend said they got stuck in traffic. They instead said, in all their generosity, don't worry, we'll give you chemical abortion pills. So they give her a chemical abortion pill. It's a cocktail, it's multiple pills. She's pregnant with twins. She goes home to Georgia and eventually starts to get very sick. At one point, she's throwing up blood. So she eventually makes her way to the ER. She gets to the ER, the doctors diagnose that she is septic. Parts of the child, parts of the placental tissue remained within her womb. They started treating her with antibiotics. Once again, we don't know what happened, but for 20 hours, she's in the hospital, and they didn't do a DNC, an emergency DNC, to remove the remaining parts of the dead child and the placenta for 20 hours. By the time they get into the OR, they do emergency hysterectomy, and she dies in the OR. The abortion industry, ironically, is saying that this is because of the pro-life movement. The pro-life movement forced this woman to drive to North Carolina, pay an abortionist for abortion. The abortionist doesn't actually do the abortion, gives her pills and sends her home, even though the pills that she has and she's given have a black box warning that are very specific about signs of infection, because that's one of the biggest risks of chemical abortion pills. She goes into an ER. We have no idea what's going on in the ER because the doctors have refused to talk, and she dies, and suddenly it's my fault. Okay, yeah. What we know is 3 people are dead. 3 people are dead because a woman felt like her only option was to drive to another state and pay someone for a surgery and then eventually drugs to end the life of her twins. There are a lot of things we do not know. Kamala Harris today went in front of the national press at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time for, I think it was National Black Journalists Association or something like that, and said this woman's death is on Donald Trump's hands. It was a result of Donald Trump. Once again, I've already established, one, that this law was passed by Georgia legislators, who many of them hate Donald Trump. That goes back to the 2021 Senate runoff election, by the way. There's like a lot of bad blood between Georgia Republicans and Donald Trump. So it wasn't really in Donald Trump's hands. He didn't pass the law, and he didn't help pass the law. But it was all his fault. I think we'll see it a lot in the campaign. We know I've done a lot of interviews in the past 2 years, back and forth with reporters looking for cases specifically of women who've died in red states to blame red state pro-life laws.
So the fact remains, this, the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, they really came out in the latest Supreme Court case that they were saying was, and I think that it wound up being that they didn't have standing, is the safety testing and all of these things were shorthanded. The FDA went ahead and allowed mifepristone to be sent out. And essentially what this is not requiring, they didn't require any of the ultrasounds or anything to be done to see if everything had been actually removed from inside of the woman's womb where she had killed her 2 kids. And so this is the danger of just mailing out these abortion drugs, forcing women to essentially have miscarriages. And then they blame the Republicans, the people who say you shouldn't do that to begin with, but they blame the Republicans for it, even though it was an abortion that actually killed this woman, and naturally the abortion killed the 2 kids. But the abortion is, this is why it's pretty simple. The stance on abortion for me is abortion 100% of the time ends in a death. It's not, they say that it's preserving the ability for the woman to go out and keep a $60,000 a year job making PowerPoint slides for somebody. But it ultimately 100% of the time ends in the death of a child, of an infant. And there are certain risks, obviously, that are associated with that. And they want to pitch this as though it's some riskless procedure. There's absolutely nothing that could go wrong with this. Here, take a couple pills, call me in the morning, and a woman gets septic and dies. But they say, no, it's 100% safe all the time. It's not safe for the child. It's definitely not always safe for the woman. But the fact that they would take those circumstances, turn them around, and blame the pro-life side, who wouldn't have that done in the first place. The woman never would have become septic because the woman never would have had an abortion. And there wouldn't be 3 dead bodies, as there were in this instance. So it's just, I highlight all that just to remind you that the stories will be twisted and contorted. The stories about Donald Trump are twisted and contorted. About his lawsuits are twisted and contorted. About what's going on with illegal immigration is twisted and contorted. We have to look 2 and 3 levels deep, unfortunately, because we don't, or come here, and I'll give you, I give it my 100% effort every time that I go to deliver something. And if I'm ever wrong, I will most certainly tell you that I'm wrong. But we have to do the hard work, especially leading up to this election. If you're somebody who's on the fence, leading up to this next election, we really have to do the legwork. It's more critical now than ever before. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave comments below. We're on X Locals Rumble on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video. Love you guys. God bless America.